Welcome back to the FloTrack podcast. My name is Lincoln Shrike, joined today by Gordon Mack, and we also have Oklahoma State head coach Dave Smith joining us on the show. There's a lot of chaos going on with the running world, with fall sports being postponed, possible March 15th NCAA cross country championships. We'll get into all that, but first, Dave, how are you today?
Good, doing well, hanging in there. Had practice this morning and spent some time with my own kids, and now kind of getting on the rest of the day.
What has the last 6 months been like from you from a coaching perspective, dating back to being at NCAA indoors and that getting wiped out and the uncertainty that has followed?
Well, I didn't go to NCAAs because I was supposed to leave, and then things started getting really hairy, and it kind of looked like we weren't going to go, so I didn't go. And then I was supposed to leave on Thursday, and then we canceled Thursday night. And I Wednesday evening, I said, I'm not going to go down there because it doesn't look good. So I didn't go. But since then, my nature is kind of to play out in my head worst case scenarios. So for me, I went to a really dark place right away and just sort of thought, college athletics is in trouble. The NCAA is in trouble. My job's in jeopardy. How are we going to get through this? And I kind of saw the whole house of cards coming down and kind of prepared myself for really the worst. And so I talked to my coaching colleagues, both here at OSU and then other track and cross country coaches across the country. And they're now coming to a place where I kind of was a long time ago. And so for me, every little thing we've heard has been a step up from where I thought we might be. So for me, things have been getting better and better and better as the summer and the fall's gone on. And so I feel pretty good about things. I'm like, man, this is way better than I thought it'd be. We just took a 20% salary reduction. And to me, I was like doing cartwheels because I had kind of said, I told my wife at one point, I go, look, I've always said I would do this job for free, and we're about to find out because I think we may get furloughed or 100% salary reduction, or it might take absolutely drastic measures to keep athletic departments afloat this next year. And I said, so we better buckle up and hold on to our seats because I might be working for free for a year. And so I was ready for that. And then when I found out it was 20%, I was like, whoa, I just got an 80% raise.
Well, that's a good way to look at it. Positive way.
Yeah. Well, it's positive. They started at a very negative place. I honestly, when they canceled the NCAA basketball tournament, I was like, man, this is not good. It's going to be hard to recover from this. That's a lot of lost revenue.
You mentioned how you were thinking worst case scenario back in March. When you see a fellow Power 5 school like Minnesota have to put an end to their men's track program, what was your reaction from that decision?
I feel heartbroken for them and their alumni and the guys in that team. Minnesota is, perennially a great program, both in track and cross country. They've been kind of, one of the mainstays on the national scene. And it's hard to see a program like that at a university with an athletic department in the Big Ten be in that scenario. And we can second guess everybody's decisions all day long, and it does no good. It's just, it's sobering to think that a place like the University of Minnesota has gotten to the point where they're going to cut track and field. I think, that's hard to see.
Do you feel like that because the Big 12 and other Power 5 schools have decided to go on with football, that has been a huge reason why, like you said, you're not taking 100% salary reduction, you're only taking a 20%?
Well, I don't think this is over. I mean, I think that, the cuts have been made and we're good and we're going to move forward and everything's going to be great. I mean, at OSU, I think we're still, after all of our, our operations reductions, our salary reductions, some furloughs, some layoffs, we're still looking at possibly a $30 million shortfall between what we're bringing in and what we're trying to spend. So that $30 million has to come from someplace. And I think we're not alone. I think we're probably positioned better than most because our athletic department debt is so low compared to our normal, budget. And our debt service isn't a huge chunk of what we do. But, across the country, there's a lot of programs and a lot of athletic departments that are facing similar shortfalls or more, and also have big debt service they got to figure out how to take care of. So I don't think this is we're out of the woods yet. I think, we've gone through the first round, and most of us are still standing, but we have lost some programs in that first round, including, like you said, Minnesota, a Power 5 program.
Some of the criticism when Minnesota cut their track team was focused, and I'm sure there was criticism prior to this, but it was focused on, well, these athletic programs aren't managing their money very well. And I know the pandemic has hurt people that were prepared possibly the best as possible. But I know it's an institution by institution basis, but do you think that's a serious problem in the NCAA, that money is not managed well by athletic departments?
I think a couple of things. First of all, I've heard this criticism of athletic directors and programs, and it's usually by people who are about to get their salaries cut, and it hurts. They don't want their salary cut. And they're basically saying, if my salary is cut, myself and my family can't survive this. And my kind of what I think is like, look, if you expect your university to plan for a once in 100-year pandemic that destroys the economy and be ready for that, then at the very least, you should be ready personally, right? And most of us don't plan for, a once in 100-year pandemic or anything else, world war or something that might totally disrupt the economy globally and change the way we do things. So I don't criticize a lot of these. I don't think it's fair to criticize some of these athletic departments and say they mismanage their money in terms of not having, a full year's worth of expenditures in reserve. I think most of us don't have a year's worth of our expenditures in reserve. On the other hand, if you look at the way the increase in spending in athletic departments has gone up pretty much exponentially over the last 20 years, you can say we were kind of drunk on excess for a while, and it looked like the gravy train was going to keep on rolling and the money was going to keep coming in. And we spent, I think a lot of places spent like a lot of us do. They spent money they didn't have, knowing it was coming in the future. And when that future gets disrupted, man, it puts you in a tough spot. So I think that this whole thing is going to reset college athletics. I think a lot of the excesses we've had and a lot of the things we've taken for granted, chartering flights and, instead of taking a bus, or spending 2 or 3 extra nights in a hotel at meets, or just a lot of the things we've done that weren't even considered, wouldn't even dreamed of 20 years ago. We're probably going to set ourselves back 20 years and say, hey, let's reset and go back to where we were. I think probably some salaries are going to be reset. I think budget, team budgets are going to be reset, and it's going to be probably for a lot of us much more, not only regional, but more local competition rather than, hey, let's everybody get on a plane and fly to Seattle or fly to Boston or fly to San Francisco or whatever. I think probably those days are going to be curtailed significantly, probably for the next 4 or 5 years at least, until we can recover from this.
There's been a lot of developments in the status of cross country. Obviously, a month or two ago, it was canceled, and now we're thinking we might have it in March. What is your understanding of where things stand with the potential of a NCAA cross country championship happening this school year?
Well, the sport committee recommended to the COC that we contest cross country. The COC, I think, was on the fence and kind of leaning towards not contesting cross country. It'd be the only fall sport they were planning to not contest. And I think some of the arguments I heard is that, cross country athletes have indoor track, but in reality, of the 255 men and 255 women that go to the national championships in cross country every year, about 12% of them go to the indoor championships. So even the All-Americans in cross country, not all of them make it to indoor nationals. So to say to a cross country athlete, hey, don't worry about it, you got indoors, isn't fair to cross country athletes. And that really rubs me the wrong way as a cross country coach, that cross country gets swept under this track blanket like it's the same sport. And the reality is most track and field athletes do not go to cross country nationals, and most cross country athletes that go to nationals do not go to indoor championships or outdoor championships. They're really different sports with some crossover. So I think there was a kind of a lot of feedback from the coaching association, from different conferences, from different coaches, and the COC, whatever was or wasn't the case, they ended up recommending to the D1 council that we continue with cross country planned in the winter, and the D1 council has, I think, did they vote on that last week?
Yeah,
I can't remember. I think the D1 council, if they haven't voted on last week, they're about to, and then it goes to basically to the board of governors. So it looks like we're on for at least planning a cross country nationals March 15th.
where does that leave you with this being currently in flux, and the meet, if it happens, is scheduled to be on your course, at least as of last update? What are you doing now to prepare for the meet, and maybe what are you not doing, noting that it's possible it doesn't happen?
Well, we are going to operate that we're on until we're off. It's kind of like everything right now, right? Everything is until it isn't. And so I think the best practice is to plan on it being there. And if we're over prepared and ready to go and then we don't get it, well, it's disappointing, but no harm done. If we plan on, hey, it's probably isn't going to happen, and the last minute we find out, better scramble and get yourself together because we're having this meet, well, that's hard to do. So I'm optimistic. I think it's not difficult under the pandemic to have a cross country season. I think the nature of the sport, being outdoors, if you can test your athletes 24 hours prior, which like we can now with rapid testing, and get negative results for all who are racing, it's pretty safe. And so I think that at least for cross country, we've got a great chance of pulling it off. So I'm excited about it. What we are doing is like I said, we're preparing that we're going to be a full go. It sounds like the fall will be taken into consideration when planning for or qualifying for the championships in March. And probably that's only fair. I think there's a lot of programs that might want to participate that can't really get to good cross country meets in January and February due to weather. So let them show out now in the fall and just assume that same team is going to be, for the most part, intact when they get to March. So that means we got to have a good season. We're going to have 2 races here on our home course, October 3rd and October 17th. And then we're going to go to the Big 12 championships in Kansas, in Lawrence, Kansas, and we're going to try to win that. I think the winner of our conference will have a really good chance of being selected to the nationals. So we're going to try to take as much doubt out of the equation and win our conference.
You talk about winning your championship gives you a good chance of making nationals. How will they, do you think, are they going to decide who goes to nationals? We're used to having a regional system with points and a regular season like that. What is the thought of what they're going to do to try to qualify those 255 athletes?
My best guess is that they are going to just select teams. They're going to take 1 through 31. They're going to pick them.
Who would pick?
The NCAA committee. So the sport committee oversees all championships, right? So the NCAA sport committee governs how they govern how we qualify, when we can qualify, how the meets run, what the nationals actually looks like, what the rules of surround qualifying. It's all determined by the committee, like every other sport. So in basketball, you have a sport committee that selects the 65 teams that go to the tournament, right? In every other sport, soccer, the soccer committee selects the teams that actually go. There's some automatic qualifiers, but they select the rest. Cross country is going to have to be the same way now, where we're used to an objective formula that we can all know what the answers is. We can plug it into a computer and we can know before the NCAA announces who's going, who's not. Most sports don't have that. There's a subjective component to it, where a committee is sitting in a room discussing who deserves to go and who doesn't. I think our sport will be much more like that this time around.
Do you think there's any I was just going to say, do you think there's any possibility that this system could go so well and they say, well, wow, this worked really well and every other sport does this, it could maybe just fully replace the regional system going forward?
I think that would be very difficult for the people doing it. I think they're in for a world of stress and anxiety this winter. When you try to pick teams, no matter what you do, you are going to have 10 teams furious that they didn't get selected, right? And there's no way to make everybody happy. And I think maybe we're a little spoiled and that we've got this objective system that we've used in the past. It works pretty well. I think if you're thinking has there been a time in the last 20 years where anybody in the top 10 teams that would be a consensus top 10 team was not selected? I think the answer would be no. I think for the most part, everybody in the top 10 makes it, probably everybody in the top 20. And I would argue that really we're probably 25 strong. We probably get the 25 of the top 25 teams in on most years. So I would say it's unlikely to change because it's simple. There's no argument. We can feel bad about it. We can think the rules should be different, but it's an algorithm. We know how it works. And with a little nuance that we've seen in the past where there can be some, subtleties in how certain selection procedures are interpreted. But at the end of the day, there is a program, there is a set method of how we determine who gets to go. I think cross-country coaches will like that. I don't think in the old days, look, before you guys were following the sport, when I was running, it was a selection. You had your automatic qualifiers, and then a committee sat in a room and decided who got to go. And we got away from it because a lot of people felt like certain coaches would call their buddies on the committee and say, hey, get me in, we did this and that, whatever. And, we go way back. And there was this sense, I think probably not really fair, but there's a sense that it was a good old boy network and that, certain people would help them, their friends in coaching get in when maybe a more deserving team didn't get in. And that the psychology of, well, this team has been good forever, therefore they should probably be selected. It's hard to undo that psychology and say, well, Oklahoma State was really terrible this year. And yes, they qualified, 19 of the last 20 years, but this isn't one of them. We shouldn't take them. I think people got tired of that, of you get in because you were good before. And so we went to this more objective system. And I think now we're kind of married to it. So I would think it'd be hard to move away from it again.
Do you think will this committee be a bunch of cross-country minds, or is it no? Will they know that whoever wins the Sun Belt Conference is not as good of an auto lock compared to who wins the Pac-12?
Well, the committee is made up of coaches and administrators, right? And the administrators can be at the conference level, so people representing certain conferences, or from universities. They can be, but usually aren't athletic directors, like head athletic directors. They're often sports supervisors or SWAs or deputy athletic directors. And then they can be conference commissioners, but they really haven't been in the last 15, 20 years. Those people more like to be on basketball committees and, I think things that seem a little more sexy. So it's typically people that sometimes you get people that don't have a lot of real experience with cross country. And the coaches can be track coaches or cross country coaches. And some of them are really experienced in cross country and understand it. And some of them might be more track oriented or track experienced and be, kind of more familiar with the inner workings of track. So in any given year, you probably have probably 1 to 3 or 4 people that really are in the woods with cross country and understand, kind of start top to bottom how cross country works. I feel really good about the committee that is serving right now. There's some really good people on there, and some people that really understand the sport. I think some really smart people. So I'm pretty confident that they'll do a really good job selecting. I'm not worried about it. And I think whether I'm in or out, I know that the people on there are going to do a good job. I think, one of the guys, well, I'm not gonna call anybody out. There's some really good people on there that I think are going to do a good job.
Do you have a sense among the coaching population across cross country and track and field in the NCAA right now, who is kind of forming and I don't expect you to name names, but who is forming the resistance against having cross country in the winter? I bring that up because you said the D1 Council, and when they kind of voted on this last week, they had a quote, and it said that there was, quote, concern in the membership of the conflict of having a cross country season with a potential track season. Who exactly is not wanting this to happen, cross country?
It's a good question. And, in my conference, we had a conference call with the head coaches, and we were kind of mixed bag whether we should have it or not. And my argument was, look, we are all head coaches or directors of programs that includes cross country. And therefore, we should be fighting for cross-country athletes. And I use the same argument I used earlier. I said, look, cross-country, indoor track is not a distance runner's event. I mean, really the 5,000, I guess you can say, is a distance race. In my mind, it's kind of a middle distance race. 3K and down to me are middle distance races and are dominated by people, especially on the men's side, that aren't necessarily the best cross-country athletes. Now, you get some that can do everything, right? And there's no doubt about that. I think there was 30 men that made it to cross-country nationals that also made it to indoor nationals last year. And 31 men and 30 women. So there is a certain percentage to get to do both. But for the other 220 athletes that went to cross-country nationals, indoors isn't necessarily a viable option. So in my program, I find it really hard to get athletes firing on all cylinders for cross-country, then indoor track, then outdoor track. And when we've done well in cross-country, and then let's come back in indoor and really try to get it done, we'll get some people through to nationals. But then by the time we get to outdoors, we're just out of gas. And even if we make it to the national championships, I mean, I've had guys that were elite athletes get last in the 10K at nationals. Just basically all they could do is jog around the track because it took everything they had to get there at the end because they're just out. It's just too much. So typically what we've done recently in the more recent past is we run hard in cross country. The indoor season, it is or it isn't. We run very, very few 5Ks. I almost never run anybody in a 5K. It has to be someone really special or I won't even try. And then we'll try to come back outdoors and be ready again. So we've kind of, at least at the national level, brushed off indoors. I think a lot of good programs have. I was talking to a really good friend of mine in coaching who, I'm not going to mention his name, it'll be obvious. It's true. Mike Smith from Northern Arizona. And he was talking about how they've been really good recently. And he's got some superstar athletes. And even for them, Nationals outdoors last year was almost one race too long. They were really rolling until, we're talking about 2019, until they got to the national meet. And then they started to run out of gas. And they just didn't have that same fire they had had for really 10 and a half months or whatever it was. And, he said the same thing. And I just think it's hard. And so for me, it doesn't seem like it's a struggle. I'm going to run cross country in the fall. I might run a race or two in the winter, maybe not. And if we get selected, then we will go to the cross country championships. If I have a guy who's qualified to the indoor championships and the cross country championships, if he's a miler, I might say, hey, go and run the mile and let's come back and run cross country 2 days later. I don't think it's impossible. If he's a 3K, 5K guy, I might say, let's make some decisions. And I'll probably let that kid decide. You want to go run the 5K at nationals? You want to come help your team try to win a national title? From my experience, most guys would rather come, if we're a good team, they'd rather go to cross country nationals. If we're a team that looks like we're going to be 30th, they might run indoor track, but I'd let them decide. I think my attitude is, let's be permissive. That's my attitude. Be permissive. I don't want to stop anybody from doing anything. If you and your program want to do it this way, go for it. If you'd rather do it this way, go for it. But don't tell me what I can or can't do. And I hope they don't say to an athlete, you have to choose indoors or cross country, because you're putting a kid in a really tough spot. If he says, okay, I want to do cross country and his team doesn't get selected, well, that's hardly fair because now he gets nothing when he maybe could have gone indoors. My hope is that they say it's up to each institution to manage this, just like it is in other multi-sport. We had a girl in the past here who was an indoor and outdoor track athlete, but also played basketball. So we had a manager, she was on a basketball scholarship. So she was a great high jumper. So she did both sports at once, and no one from the NCAA said you can't do that. I would hope they would do the same thing and just know that between, coaches and athletes, they can figure this out. My other point is that, these young men and women we're talking about, I keep hearing that we've got to protect them. We got to, not abuse them. And that's all true. But I think that these men and women we're talking about are old enough to sign up for our military and go over to foreign places and be in life and death situations and make life and death decisions. And we trust them at 18 years old to do that. I think we can trust them to figure out how many races to run, between themselves, their parents, and their coaches. I think we can figure it out and not put anybody in harm's way.
So it's not decided yet if it would be indoor or cross country, or you could do both. Because, I think about you, think about your team a few years ago. Imagine if you had German Fernandez on your team and you had a podium quality team, championship quality team. What would you do with someone like German who could win a mile
Well,
or be a
that's
top
the point.
5 guy
What
for
happened
your
during the
cross country
session?
team?
And I remember German ran 3:55 in the mile. He broke the NCAA record. He was the world indoor junior record holder, the American junior record holder. He won our conference by 10 seconds in a 3:55.02. He'd also run 7:47 that year, fastest junior time ever. No one ever mentions it because it was on Washington's track, so therefore it doesn't count. But it's still 3,000 meters. He went 7:47 as an 18-year-old. He was ranked number 1 in the mile by 2 seconds faster than anybody else in the country, and number 2 in the 3K behind Galen Rupp. He didn't run nationals because he wanted to go to Amman, Jordan and run the Worlds. And we started looking at his schedule. He had run fast 3:56 against Dorian Ulrey in the end of January. Then he had gone and run 7:47 in the middle of February. Then at our conference meeting, he went 3:55. And then he was going to go to nationals and then turn around a week later and fly over to Amman, Jordan and try to run World Cross. And so we had a discussion and said, hey, let's pick one or the other. And he said, I'd rather do World Cross. I said, okay, fine. So he didn't run NCAAs.
So I guess you have experience with dealing with someone choosing something over NCAA.
Yeah, I'm going to let athletes pick. I mean, I think what we do, we get conflicted. And I think coaches are conflicted because salaries and bonus structures and your self-esteem are all tied up into how athletes perform. But really, we're here for athletes. And, it's their dreams, it's their talent, it's their goals. And I think track and field and cross country to a lesser extent, but certainly track and field is really an individual sport. And I want to help people do the things that they dream about, that get them excited, that motivate them. And, try to take our own egos and bonus structures and stuff like that out of it and let these athletes do what they think is important. So I'm going to let athletes choose. If they want to, they'd rather go for indoor track and blow off cross country. I got some really good middle distance women who I think can help me in cross country. They may say, no, I'd rather go for the DMR and go to nationals and run the DMR. Well, if that's what they want to do, we'll go for it.
We're talking about the option between indoor and cross country, kind of, I guess, assuming that indoor is going to be a reality or a possibility. And I don't want to ask you to be a pandemic expert, but is it reasonable to expect that indoor could even happen, even in a scaled down capacity, given the fact that we know that this virus passes easier indoors?
I don't see how. Not to be a pessimist, but again, I go to worst case scenarios, and I'm looking at this thinking, if you're going to design an event to spread this virus, I'd design an indoor track meet. Because you have people running hard, breathing hard, they're on top of each other, it's crowded. Everybody gets that indoor hack and cough. Well, you are just coughing and projecting all kinds of stuff into the air that's then recirculated. To me, I think many of the tracks we have relied on heavily in the last 10 years are going to be offline. Because if you're a football school that has a track in its football building and you're playing spring football now and it's 35 degrees and raining sideways in January, you're probably not practicing outside. You're not going to let some track coach set up for a track meet and take 4 days out of your practice schedule. That's just not, I just don't see how it's going to happen in some of these places. So I think some of these places will be taken off by the need for football to use their facilities. Some places will be taken offline by their local or state governments. I think, there's some states that are being really protective and much more limiting of what people can do indoors. I think some of them we have tracks in some of those states where in the past they've hosted several good meets that they might not be able to host this year because their local authorities or their state health departments might say, you're not putting 2,000 people in a building. You can put 50 in there, right? Well, by the time you get out with officials and timers and meet personnel, there's no room left for athletes. So I think it's going to be hard.
Do you think there would ever be a chance that they would then maybe just extend outdoor season and let people run outdoor track like in February or March?
Track has actually already started, right? You can run outdoor track meets, honestly, starting in September if you want to. The difference is the sport committee, who governs when you can qualify, says you can't qualify until March. That's the window, right? In the old days, again, when I was running, people would finish cross-country season, then they'd go to a warm weather place in December and run a 10K and qualify for nationals. Because back then the date was December 1st when you could start qualifying. And so people would go in December, run a 10K someplace with nice warm weather, everybody get qualified, and then they take 3 months off and come back to track in March. That's changed, but it could change back, right? That's just a committee decision. What's the window? And the committee decides when you can qualify. It's not a big process. It doesn't take a lot of bureaucracy or red tape to get through. The committee can say, hey, for whatever reasons, we're extending qualifying from January 1st until the last day of qualifying before the regional meet.
Can you help me understand a little bit of go ahead.
Sorry, no. Me and Lincoln, before we did this podcast, decided we're going to do 2 questions each, and I have completely ignored that rule, and that's why I keep on talking over everyone. So I apologize.
I was going to ask how you're possibly sorting out the mess of you've got some of these athletes that you anticipated would be graduated by now. They're going to be out of eligibility, and that serves perfectly into incoming freshmen. Now you maybe have people holding on to their eligibility, but you still want to sign incoming freshmen. Like, how is this screwing up recruiting from the standpoint of allocating scholarship dollars?
Well, fortunately, I'm at a school where my athletic director was a walk-on golfer here 50 years ago, and he became an All-American. And then the day he graduated, he became the head coach. And then he won 8 national championships as a golf coach in the middle of Oklahoma, right? In the middle of USA. It's not really a golf mecca. And he built what has become one of the most successful golf programs in NCAA history. So he understands being an athlete. He understands being an athlete in a non-revenue sport. He understands being a walk-on. He understands that your dreams and ambitions as a walk-on are no different than a full scholarship Heisman candidate football player, right? To you, your goal is exactly as important as that guy trying to win the Heisman. So he has always been athlete first, which is why I have always been committed to OSU. I just love the philosophy here. And he committed since day one to, we are going to honor every scholarship. And not only that, for anybody who gets their clock extended by this COVID, we are going to continue their scholarships as long as they're permitted to be here and want to be here. So for us, we've got, for example, 2 women coming back who are middle distance runners that will come back this spring that would have been out of eligibility. Both of them are on big scholarships. And both of them, if they stayed, would have presented problems for me because I'd already signed people to replace them. But because the NCAA said those scholarships for athletes that had their last season disrupted by the shutdown can come back, and you can still give them a scholarship without counting against your totals. The problem is you got to pay for it, right? And a lot of places are budget crunches. But like I said, my athletic director has said since day one, we are going to honor every scholarship, and we're going to extend everybody's scholarship as long as they can possibly be here and want to be here. So for me, it hasn't been a problem. It's been like, man, this is awesome. Instead of having 18 scholarships in the women, I've got 20 this year. And on the men, instead of having 12, I could have 14 because we're going to extend scholarships. Now, because of what's happening in the fall, the same thing has happened for cross country. We're all going to run. We could go win the national championship. I could have a guy win the national championship and he's burnt no eligibility, right? So I got Ryan Smeaton, for example, this would be his 5th year. He's going to run for us. Hopefully we do really well. We're going to run our conference meet. We're going to run the national meet. And then he's going to get another 5th year next year, a 6th year, right? But he's on a scholarship, a big scholarship. We're going to have to support that. Well, it's going to come from the fact that we are allowed to extend scholarships.
So is it known that if the cross country season in the winter will be like these Big 12 championship where everyone can run or not run and it doesn't matter with eligibility?
Yep.
So the teams that
that's already been determined by the Board of Governors. No fall sports.
So that includes this winter one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I didn't know if they took that away once they give you a winter championship.
Sorry, what?
I didn't know if I knew that was the rule for the fall sports, but I thought since they then rescheduled the fall sports, then the eligibility is back on, or no. So the winter cross country championship doesn't count towards eligibility, basically.
Nothing any fall sport athlete does this year, whether it be fall or spring, counts against them. Because it's too uncertain, right? At any point, you don't know when that sport's going to be canceled again. And so as coaches and as athletes, we were facing this dilemma. Do we go for it and burn eligibility and then lose our championship like what happened to indoor athletes last year, right? Where they got all the way up to indoor championship. And for many of those the best track athletes, the only thing they care about is indoor meet, right? The indoor nationals. But that got taken away, and they didn't get their season back. So you were forced to face this poker game of, do we go for it? Do we not? Do we, and to take away that uncertainty, not only from track, but from all sports, they just said, look, whatever you do this year doesn't count. It was the right thing to do, I think.
I guess I'll go one more time. Yeah. I guess, well, I want to follow up on a thing that you talked about many years ago. When you first met Lincoln, you referred to Lincoln as a member of the FloTrack D squad, not the B squad, not the C squad, but the D squad. I was wondering, Lincoln's been at Flo for a few years now. Has he upgraded to at least a C squad or B squad? Or where is the status of Lincoln on his squad tier in FloTrack?
Lincoln, he had some holes in his game when he started. His 3-point shooting was atrocious. He was a good hustler, good rebounder. The guy would track down loose balls. He was kind of your Dennis Rodman. But in that time, he's worked on his game. He has moved up the ranks. I think he's, at least an A squad at FloTrack. He's probably been working on MVP type seasons. He's got a few years to go for the MVP if you talk nationally, but definitely he's an A squad. He's a starter. He's a guy that probably without him, you're going to lose 5 or 6 games you wouldn't otherwise lose. I think you guys got a great squad, and all around you can cover most games. You can cover for this lack of production, but you're going to lose some you would have otherwise won if he's out.
Yeah,
Dave,
that's appropriate.
I thought this was going to be an opportunity for you to continue to dunk on Lincoln, but now you just elevated him. I just turned it into a praising.
There was
Lincoln
a couple
session.
dunks. That was a couple dunks in there. It's all good. It was a good introduction to, that has been 2014, which seems like a long time ago. But, I got the appropriate introduction to Stillwater when Bobby was still there. He gave me kind of the tough love too. So it was it was good. We had a good first meeting, but everything's been all roses since then. So you got to remember
there was some pretty rapid turnover there at FloTrack for a while, where these walk-ons are coming in and getting cut, another walk-on is coming in and getting cut. And you're just like, after a while, you get tired of these guys. You think, man, come on, recruit, dudes. What's going on over there? You guys got to sign some blue chippers. And Lincoln may have been a walk-on, but he's risen to the point of, we were in the team meeting the other day, and whoever it was, Floriani or someone was standing around. They said they had some bit of production. At the end of it, they said, hey, by the way, they threw a towel to Lincoln. The open inside was a full scholarship. Everybody stood up and cheered and kind of patted him on the back.
Would love that. Yeah. It's been nice after 6 years to receive a paycheck. That was a big thing for me. No, I do want to turn it back to a serious topic for a second. I guess not serious, but more serious than that. For the last couple of years at Oklahoma State, well, first off, when I think of Oklahoma State, when I was running, I would see you guys at the Midwest Regional. You guys would jog the Midwest Regional, go to nationals, either win or finish on the podium. The last few years with the program, you've had superstars on both sides, but for whatever reason, you maybe haven't been able to string it together. 5 athletes for the men, 5 athletes for the women. Are you now closer than maybe you have been to having a full established cross-country season or team that's going to compete for podiums than maybe you have been in the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think that we went through some lean years there. Like you said, we had some guys that it's too bad we couldn't surround them with some help, because we had some really good athletes, and guys like Craig Nowak or Josh Thompson or Hassan Abdi, Isai Rodriguez, who's still here. We've had some issues, and eventually it comes down to the head coach. And I think we had some toughness problems, probably some culture problems, some focus problems. And a big part of it was my attention was divided. I was probably serving on too many committees. I have 2 children of my own now. It took a while for me to figure out how to balance that, raising your own kids and then trying to be, when I first started here, I was a 90-hour-a-week guy minimum. I just never left the office and just recruited or worked in the office nonstop. And I think, so my part is I kind of finally got that figured out. I got a nice balance going. I think that we probably had, we had some addition by subtraction. I think that our team culture right now, we've always had talent. I think our team culture right now is better than it's been probably in 6 or 7 years. And it's not any one person, it's just chemistry and a group of people. I think, I keep telling the guys this is the best team I've had since 2010. And that includes 2011 and 2012, 2013, when we were second, first, and third. I think this group of guys, whether we win this year or not, a win is coming. I mean, we're in the race for a win is coming soon. And we got some great young guys. I love our attitude. I'm watching today at practice, just, we had some guys struggle. We worked out really hard on Saturday. Today was a bit of a struggle. And I'm watching some guys and I'm pulling them out of workouts and, hey, that's enough for you. And guys are visibly pissed off that I'm not letting them finish the workout or whatever. And, that's a good sign. Before I'd have guys say, yeah, you're right, I'm done. And it would be no fight to keep going. So I think we got guys that believe, we got guys that are training hard. Just looking, we do very similar things year in and year out. It doesn't change a lot. And looking at the way we're running in workouts at this time of the year, there's no question we haven't had a team with depth, upfront power and depth like this since 2010. So we've been comparing ourselves to the 2009 year. 2009 we won. We barely squeaked by. We had I think we went like 9, 10, 13, 28, and 97. And 97 was German. And if you remember, that was the year he ended up becoming a vegetarian for a little while and didn't know how to manage it and didn't really tell anybody and was anemic and just kind of ran the whole year with anemia. And we didn't know until afterwards and kind of got him tested. Oh God, that explains it. But we hung on to win and barely squeaked it out. I think we beat Oregon by 12 or 16 or 15 points, something like that. And we've been looking at the workouts from that year. Just the depth we have here is way better. The number of bodies doing similar things to the top group at that time. I just think, it's not necessarily that every guy is as good as John Kosge, who was second in nationals in the 10K and 8th in cross country and 13th in the year I'm talking about. They're not as good as he was. They're running similar workouts, so they might be in the neighborhood. I think it's tough to be as good as he was. And I mean, John could sandbag it all year and then show up at nationals and dominate. So I think we're really good. I'm excited. And, I keep telling guys, it's just my luck that we went through 4, 5, 6 years of kind of struggling. We finally got it put back together. And of course, now we got this asterisk year, where we might have a national championships. It might be half the teams. It might be 2/3 of teams. It might be, I don't know who's going to show up, but I think we're pretty good.
Are you healthy on the men's side? And I mean, there's a lot of guys
right
on the
now
Oklahoma State.
We don't.
Like, is he Saeed healthy?
We don't have anybody in our top group who's missing time. We have one guy who's missing time, but he's been missing time for 3 years from one thing or another. He hasn't raced for us in 3 years. And super talented guy, a guy who ran basically 14 flat and 4 flat in high school or thereabouts. And he is, it's just heartbreaking because he works hard, he does everything right, and he just can't get healthy. It doesn't matter if he thinks about running, he gets hurt. So other than that one athlete, everybody is running right now. We have one guy who I'm not letting do workouts because he's had some hamstring niggles, but he's running, about 60, 70% volume right now and kind of almost coming back to full volume. So we're pretty good. And honestly, that was one of the things that went really well for us for about 7 years. We didn't take an injury in our top 7 for 7 years. Every single year, the group I thought was my top 7, we didn't lose anybody. And that was kind of the secret to success. Or if we did lose a guy, we had a guy, very similar to step in and replace. So it was kind of I wish I knew what magic we had back then that stopped people from getting hurt, but we just never dealt with injuries.
One more question, and we'll let you get out of here. I know you have kids to contend with. We all know Midwest weather can be unpredictable any time of year, but I think of a potential March 15th national championship in Stillwater, and I imagine it could either be very, very nice or brutally cold. What do you think this, I guess twofold, what will the course look like? I mean, I know you got the preview of it at the regional championships last year. What would a national championships on March 15th, if we can envision it, what would it look like on this brand new course?
Well, like you said, it could be 80 degrees or it could be 15. You just don't know. And it could be covered in snow. It could be, wet and muddy. It could be dry and firm like a track. I mean, the footing on our course is so good that it's just perfectly smooth. It's Bermuda grass, so it will be dormant. It'll be, yellow dormant grass. So one thing we have to be careful of, we can't run too many meets in the winter, because if we get a wet, muddy day, we run on it and tear it up, it isn't growing back by March 15th, right? It's going to be torn up. So we're going to be very, very limited in what we do once the growing season stops, which is probably another 3 weeks, 4 weeks, they'll stop growing. And from that point forward, we got to be very careful. Because I want a really good surface to run on. So it drains really well. Even if we get rain on the day, it doesn't hold water. It's all elevated with drainage systems underneath. So it shouldn't be, even if we get a lot of rain, it shouldn't be too bad. I'll knock on wood. I mean, I'm sure we can get one of those 1 in 50-year storms that puts it underwater, but for the most part, it should be nice. And I would guess on average it's going to be 60 degrees and sunny. That would be my guess.
Well, we would take that every day of the week. Dave, Thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate all your responses. Wish your team the best of luck going forward. And I guess we hope to see you March at the latest for these NCAA cross country championships.
I'm hoping. Fingers crossed.
All right. Thanks.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Thank you.